take your chances on romances. Oh, you can sleep when you're dead. If you can't stay within your lenses, don't close the curtain, 'cause this ain't the end of us all.
Hello everyone, this is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, Lore and Frey, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon, releasing June 10th, 2023.
Wake up, honey. New Harmon Smith response video just dropped.
So I've been talking a little bit about Elden Ring versus Breath of the Wild. I've been making kind of like a lot of snide comments regarding the Elden Ring situation.
I love how you call it the Elden Ring situation, implying that there's literally any controversy at all other than the one you made up. Like, it's just two open world games that are good. Like, that truly is the entire situation. There's nothing more to it than that. But then again, you are you. So naturally, you took offense to the fact that there's a good non-Nintendo open world game. Little backstory for those who may be a little new here. Harmon Smith, who calls himself Cody Lee, who calls himself Harmon Smith. I honestly don't know which name to call him, so going forward, I'm just going to call him Bartholomew. Bartholomew is a massive Nintendo fanboy who's made a number of ridiculous statements in the past, including that the Switch version of The Witcher 3 looks as good as the PC version, that Nintendo should be the only gaming company in the business. He was really mad about the Steam Deck and how the Switch made it irrelevant, even though that's not true. And every once in a while, he just comes out and says things about how, like, PC gaming is dead or PC gaming is irrelevant, which, just general rule of thumb, if you have to keep saying that over a multi-year time period, it's probably not true. But over the last year or so, he's been absolutely fuming about Elden Ring specifically, largely because it's a tremendously popular and successful game that was not released on Nintendo hardware. And it really does just come down to that. It's an extremely successful and influential game that Nintendo had nothing to do with, and that upsets him. He's said a lot of things in the past also about how Souls games are stupid, and he hates Souls games and thinks they're overrated. And I point you towards this video I made a while back if you want a good look at that angle of his mindset specifically. Yes, I have made many videos on this man, and if he were to just stop saying stupid things, I would stop making these videos, but until that happens, I'm gonna keep making them. And frankly, you would think that after this much time, he would have just let it go. But no, it's May of 2023, and Bartholomew is still absolutely livid about how successful Elden Ring was. This new video that we are responding to it was released a couple weeks-ish after Tears of the Kingdom launched. But going over to Bartholomew's community tab, he is constantly fuming about From Software and anyone who likes them. 8 days ago, already on pace to outsell Elden Ring, let the coping and seething begin. 6 days ago, insane how the people who spent the past year pretending that Elden Ring was going to be bigger than Tears of the Kingdom are now desperately trying to backpedal. I never said that. Sure you didn't. This is why I had a problem with you. 3 days ago, Tears of the Kingdom is an absolute disgrace. Back in my day, Zelda was about combat, not about hiking. What's with all these different races? I don't want to talk to these big birds or these rock people. I haven't even played Elden Ring, but I think it must be better. 3 days ago, we can trash talk about Zelda and Nintendo all we like, but don't you dare make fun of Elden Ring. 2 days ago, Tears of the Kingdom plays like a DLC, but Shadows of Erdtree, now that's a proper sequel, which is something I've literally never heard anyone say. Shadows of the Erdtree is an expansion that's not out, and it is not even attempting to be a sequel, so why would anyone call that a sequel? 1 day ago, the Tears and Tears of the Kingdom referred to the salty crying of From Software and Bethesda fanboys. Also 1 day ago, guys, I own a gaming PC. I can play Elden Ring if I want. I just choose not to.
And I'd be like, why are you so obsessed with me? I know, right? It's so embarrassing.
Elden Ring doesn't just live rent-free in his brain. Elden Ring is the mayor of his brain. Elden Ring claims residency of his entire noggin. But I will give Bartholomew this. He deserves some credit because he acknowledges the greatness that is The Great Mouse Detective. Have you seen The Great Mouse Detective? Because it's fucking fantastic. It's one of the most underrated Disney movies. Honestly, one of the most underrated animated movies ever, and one of Disney's best. Like, I remember wearing out the VHS tape of this movie with my sisters growing up. It's a fucking damn shame no one remembers this movie. Go watch it. I don't know if Elden Ring just makes Bartholomew feel small, or if he's just offended that such a high-profile game skipped over the Switch, because fucking of course it did. It's a FromSoft game. But the point of this long introduction is that this man absolutely hates Elden Ring, and his reasoning is entirely based around his blind love of Nintendo, which is cringy as shit. and we're going to laugh at it.
And I would like to take a moment to kind of reflect on why. Kind of talk about like why I'm doing this, why I'm talking about such an irrelevant piece of last year's media.
Well, that irrelevant piece of last year's media still has tens of thousands of people just on Steam in the middle of a Thursday playing it. Also, Elden Ring is still in the top 40 most played games on Xbox, which is really impressive for a non-free-to-play, non-Game Pass game. So yeah, it's completely irrelevant.
That is Elden Ring. Right? Tears of the Kingdom is already well on its way to outselling the game. It's going to destroy it, you know.
Because sales equal quality, right? That's why the live-action Lion King movie is better than the original, because it made more money, right? That's how this works.
If it wasn't for, like, you know, a handful of, like, troll reviews on Metacritic, Jim Sterling.
Well, to Jim Sterling's credit, they're not a troll. They're just a moron. Also, Jim Sterling gave the game a 7 out of 10. Sterling even acknowledges that their Breath of the Wild review was also a 7 out of 10. So isn't it kind of safe to assume that someone that gave the last game a 7 out of 10 would give the sequel a 7 out of 10? You know, like, sincerity or honesty aside with Jim Sterling, is it really that hard to believe that someone who gave the last game a 7 out of 10 would give the sequel a similar number score? Like, the fact that you're specifically calling out Jim Sterling for fucking up the game's Metascore is just a little strange, especially when the game has a 95. Like, is 95 not high enough for you?
Tears of the Kingdom would have a higher Metacritic score as well. Like, the industry did everything in its power to try and prop up Elden Ring, prop up From Software, prop up PlayStation, prop up, like, the anti-Nintendo agenda while downplaying Nintendo.
What does PlayStation have to do with Elden Ring? It was a multi-plat. It had nothing to do with Sony or PlayStation. I mean, if anything, you should be yelling about the PC, because Elden Ring sold 10 million copies on PC in its first, like, week and a half, which is insane. Sony, where is the Bloodborne port? Although I guess the PS5 version does have a better Metascore than Zelda by literally one singular point. So I guess that could explain the specific calling out of PlayStation here. I don't know. Your arguments never make any sense. So I'm doing my best to find the logic for you.
And they still lost, right? That is what this all comes down to, essentially.
They lost? Why are you talking like it's a competition? You're like, oh, Zelda came out, and now it's on its way to outselling Elden Ring. Everyone lost. Everyone's against me. I'm like, bro, just play your games, shut the fuck up, and it's fine. It's going to be okay. It's not a giant war, you know? Elden Ring was good. Tears of the Kingdom is good. Like, just be happy. It's fine. You're gonna be fine. Because
last year, there was a very big, coordinated effort to downplay Tears of the Kingdom.
How could we have downplayed Tears of the Kingdom last year? It wasn't out. And how would it, how is it coordinated, you know? Like, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about a lot of people who expressed skepticism over Tears of the Kingdom last year, which, if you have a brain, you should understand that it was completely logical for people to do that. Tears of the Kingdom had really big shoes to fill. It was a direct sequel to one of the best-selling and best-reviewed games of all time while running on a piece of hardware that was built like a 2017 mobile phone. It was completely reasonable for people to be skeptical of that. That's not a coordinated effort to downplay it. That's just a lot of people having concerns about the ambitions of the game. If you didn't want people to acknowledge the ambitions of a game, then you shouldn't be yelling at them, you should be yelling at Nintendo for expressing the ambitions.
As being something that was going to be a rehash of Breath of the Wild, that was not going to live up to the legacy of the original, that wasn't all that good anyway, and From Software was the real entry, was the real go, right?
Well, there was no Zelda game last year, but there was Elden Ring last year. You keep trying to equate these two completely unrelated things. Two things can be true at once. Last year, a lot of people were expressing skepticism of Tears of the Kingdom. Also, last year, a lot of people were praising Elden Ring because by every stretch of the imagination, Elden Ring was a fantastic game. Why can't these two things just exist at the same time? Why do they have to, why does there have to be conflict between two completely unrelated things? Just because they were in the same year? I still don't understand why you take such personal offense to this game.
Elden Ring was supposed to be like the game of the year.
It was game of the year.
It was supposed to be like this big deal.
It was a big deal.
And there were all these like weird narratives surrounding Tears of the Kingdom, you know, from like the marketing and just like how Nintendo didn't show anything. And
Yeah, Nintendo was being really cagey about showing gameplay of this giant, ambitious project they were hyping up. That's going to be concerning no matter what company's doing it. I mean, frankly, I'm still concerned about Spider-Man, and we just saw gameplay of that. Like, we saw gameplay of Spider-Man earlier this week. I'm still concerned about it, because it was so scripted, and I'm not convinced that it's going to actually look that good or play that good when the player has control over it, and it's not being followed by a rigorous structure in a gameplay scenario where the enemies aren't even paying attention to the player controlling the main character. Like, welcome to the gaming industry. Until we see raw, unedited gameplay, we're gonna be skeptical of it. That's just the way things are. And the higher profile the game, the more that skepticism is going to be amplified. Like, this really isn't weird.
The delay, which a lot of people like still will continue to insist was due to the fact that Nintendo was scared of Elden Ring. Like, there was
Yeah, if you think that Elden Ring had anything to do with the delay of Tears of the Kingdom, I don't know what to tell you. Like, there's just no evidence that Nintendo was trying to avoid Elden Ring. That makes no sense. Especially since Elden Ring wasn't even on the Switch, so it's not even like it was a competing game. Like, I'll give you that one. The people saying Nintendo was scared of Elden Ring, it's, probably not true. I guess the justification for people saying that is that, Elden Ring could have snaked Game of the Year from Tears of the Kingdom, and if Nintendo was really concerned about getting Game of the Year for the year that Tears of the Kingdom comes, but at the end of the day, I don't think Nintendo really cares about that, I don't think Nintendo was going to lose sleep if they didn't win Game of the year that Tears of the Kingdom came out. I think the delay more so had to do with the fact that with the technical aspects, because Tears of the Kingdom, for all of its glory, for all the magic that Nintendo was able to work with that thing, it still kind of runs like ass. And in case you forgot, there was a day one patch that fixed a lot of the technical issues. So if anything, I would think that the delay from 2022 to 2023 for Tears of the Kingdom just had to do with getting the game running as well as it could.
Elden Ring fans were unbelievably obnoxious, right?
Glass houses, my friend.
All throughout 2022, and for the first half of 2023, we saw, the first quarter of 2023. For the first quarter of 2023...
Oh my god, did you just edit something? I've been responding to your content for literal years. That right there was the first time I've ever seen you make a cut or an edit in a video. That is the first time I've ever seen you do a video that wasn't in one take. Guys, he's evolving.
There was a big push to kind of pretend that Tears of the Kingdom wasn't going to be nearly as good, that Elden Ring would go on to be like one of the best, most well-received games ever made.
Well, that already happened. That already happened. Elden Ring is already one of the best received games ever made, and it's also one of the best selling games ever made. That wasn't a narrative, that happened.
That Zelda was like just an irrelevant like mark on history, right? Like Zelda was a dying brand.
I love how you say these things and you never back anything up. See, like your videos would be so much better if you just incorporated some basic editing, If you say a thing or you make a claim, just throw a screenshot. This is honest feedback. Just throw a screenshot on screen. Because you say some really extreme things, and for all we know, the extreme things could be true in some regard, but just the gut instinct is to not believe them because they're so extreme, but you're so convinced that they're real. Just throw a screenshot, bro. Throw us a bone. So that way we can talk about the thing you're talking about and not the way you're presenting it.
And of course, this is a mindset that like the industry has been trying to push since like the 90s, ever since the introduction of Sony PlayStation.
Yeah, guys, the industry's been pushing Elden Ring since the 90s.
Ever since even as early as Ocarina of Time, we saw these weird conspiracies being pushed that Metal Gear Solid was better than Ocarina. That every Zelda game after Ocarina was just a stale rehash of it.
I mean, there's some truth to that. It doesn't have to be presented that way, but it is an absolute fact that Ocarina became the template for Zelda games after it came out. That doesn't mean every Zelda game after Ocarina is a stale rehash, but it was the template. That's how these things work. And also, people comparing Metal Gear to Ocarina, yeah, again, welcome to the gaming world. If multiple good games come out, people are going to compare them. That's just the way this works. They don't have to be connected.
And now we're kind of seeing with Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild that like, these graphics, they're ugly. Like there's nothing impressive about this incredible physics engine. Where there's nothing like interesting or fresh and original about these ideas. They're just rehashes of Ubisoft games. They're not like From Software games at all, which are just peak open world action RPGs, right?
God, there's just so much to go through. If you're comparing Tears of the Kingdom to Ubisoft games, stop it. Also, if you're using Ubisoft as your standard for open world games, like if you're upset that an open world game is not more like a Ubisoft open world game, please shut the fuck up and play different open world games. But also, I hate to break it to you, Elden Ring is going to be like the prime standard comparison for open world games moving forward because it's one of the best reviewed ones of all time. It's one of the best selling ones of all time. And it's the most recent big blockbuster, universally acclaimed open world game. So it's going to be the main comparison. The same way that Breath of the Wild was the main comparison for years. Maybe that's why you're so upset. Because ever since Breath of the Wild came out, that was like the gold standard that every open world game was compared to. And now that Elden Ring is out, that's going to be the gold standard every open world game is compared to. I would argue even more so than Tears of the Kingdom, because Tears of the Kingdom is really just an escalation and evolution of Breath of the Wild. Nothing wrong with that at all. But Elden Ring was extremely innovative. It's extremely unique. It's a very new kind of open world game. So I really wouldn't be surprised if Elden Ring continues to be the main thing that open world games, at least, more realistic, like M-rated open world games are compared to. I wouldn't be surprised if that continues to be the way things are for at least another few years. Maybe that's why you're so upset about this.
The narrative was going along those lines for a very long time until Tears of the Kingdom actually came out. Until people got to see it and got to play it and got to experience it for the first time. Not only is Tears of the Kingdom like better than Breath of the Wild in a lot of ways, it's doing a lot of things that a lot of games simply aren't doing, period. Like when people used to say that like Tears of the Kingdom was ripping off like Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts.
I'm sorry, who said what now about what, who, what? Why did you remind me that Nuts and Bolts existed? Fuck you, don't do that. That game isn't real.
They neglected to mention the fact that like Nuts and Bolts was not a proper Banjo-Kazooie game. It was not a 3D platformer with vehicle building mechanics.
Yeah, you don't need to remind us. You don't need to remind us. You please don't. I don't want to talk about Nuts and Bolts.
Right? The way Zelda is a 3D Breath of the Wild game.
A 3D Breath of the Wild game. If only there was one of those before this.
With vehicle building mechanics, right? Zelda took the idea of like building things, sticking them together, and like giving all these cool vehicles, and really made something cool, fresh, and interesting with it. Like when you like think outside the box in this game, when you like make bridges out of like 30 logs, or build a boat or like build a glider, right? And then like use those tools to like accomplish some goal in some way, shape, or form. Like you really get a sense that this is a masterpiece. There's nothing like this out there, period.
I get what you're saying. I really do. Tears of the Kingdom. I got them mixed up. Tears of the Kingdom is a big old fucking juicy open world game with a really in-depth crafting system, item and vehicle crafting system. And that's cool. And you're right. Elden Ring doesn't have that. But compared to Tears of the Kingdom, Elden Ring is much more focused on the storytelling, the way that a lot of From Software games are. It's a lot more focused on the combat and the boss fights and the exploration. Well, I guess Tears of the Kingdom is a lot about the exploration too. But it's just different focuses, They're two open world games, and their big gimmicks, or I guess their big focuses, are different. Tears of the Kingdom, it's about the exploration, it's about the crafting and the construction. Elden Ring, it's about the exploration and about the storytelling and the boss fights. This just isn't a good direct comparison. Open world games are not a genre, It's one thing to compare one first-person shooter to a different first-person shooter, but I would argue that open world is not a genre. Open world is a descriptor. You can have an open world, like really, there's a million different things that could be open world. Just because the two games are open world doesn't mean they're good direct comparisons, even though that's what you're trying to do. And I know I said earlier that Elden Ring is going to be like the gold standard of open world games that everything is compared to. That doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean that every open world game needs to be like Elden Ring. But the point I was making before is just that every open world game was compared to Breath of the Wild. Now every open world game is going to be compared to Elden Ring. Same way that basically every Western RPG is compared to The Witcher 3. And before that, every Western RPG was either compared to Skyrim or Mass Effect. I really don't like my brain right now. I don't like what my brain does when I watch you.
And of course, there are plenty of people who are acknowledging this. Lots of like game developers on Twitter are like admitting that like they are way, way behind Nintendo. But
another perfect situation where I would love a screenshot. Just one.
There is a very real demographic of people who still refuse to admit it. They insist that there's something wrong with the physics engine. They insist the game isn't all that original. They insist there's something wrong with the weapon durability system, which was not true even in Breath of the Wild, but in Tears of the Kingdom, if you're having problems with weapon durability, that's because you don't know how fusion works.
Look, I've put like a grand total of 45 minutes into Breath of the Wild, but even I know that there was complaints to be made with the durability system.
Right? They're trying to like try to say the plot isn't very good. They're trying to say the dungeons aren't great. They're trying to say that the open world doesn't innovate enough. They're trying to say the plot doesn't make any sense.
Do you not realize that what you're criticizing is exactly what you're doing with Elden Ring? You're just listing off a whole bunch of things that people are saying about Tears of the Kingdom and just being like, it's dumb. They're saying this, they're saying this, they're saying this, and it's dumb. But literally, you did the same thing with Elden Ring. You just rapid fire a bunch of criticisms with no depth. So, like, what's the point?
None of this is true. And, like, anyone who's spent any amount of time with the game will tell you that. But there is a very real push to try and downplay this game as much as possible. And I really wonder how much this is going to stick, because I think when Breath of the Wild came out, a lot of people really convinced themselves that this was just a one-off thing, this was just a fluke, that Nintendo would go back to putting out mediocre Zelda games after this.
Well, not to give credence to those people, but also they did put out Hyrule Warriors after that, so it was kind of true.
That they would be acquired by PlayStation or whatever.
Who the fuck was saying that? This is what I'm talking about. You can't just make wild, flaming accusations that how PlayStation was going to acquire Nintendo. Are you fucking bananas? Are you off your banana rocker? What does that mean? Who said that? Nobody said that.
Like, that was the narrative, right? Remember back when Horizon Zero Dawn was, like, better than Zelda? Like, same energy, right?
I don't think a single person ever said Horizon Zero Dawn is a better game than Zelda. I had never heard that in my life.
The thing about Tears of the Kingdom, it's not necessarily that much better than Breath of the Wild. Both games are great. But the thing about Tears of the Kingdom is that it's a follow-up that's just as well received as the original, with like its own innovativeness, its own creativity, its own design, its own focus, right? It is a completely original new thing.
No. Don't do that. Don't do that. Two things can be true at once. Tears of the Kingdom can be really good, and it's also not completely original. A lot of this game is taken from Breath of the Wild, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a sequel. Every sequel is going to have a lot of its skeleton pretty much copy-pasted from the last game. That's how this works. Breath of the Wild was really good, it was really successful, and people said, more please, and Nintendo gave them more. There's nothing wrong with that. The same way that Arkham Asylum was really good. People were like, more please, Arkham City. Halo was really good. More please, Halo 2. Wolfenstein The New Order. More please, Wolfenstein New Blood. Wolfenstein New Blood. More please, shit on a plate in the shape of Wolfenstein 2. That's how the industry works. And you don't, like, two things, like, just because a game borrows and carries on where the last game's left off, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. No one will criticize that. If you do criticize that, you're just being an asshole. But you're also a raging asshole and dishonest as fuck if you try to say a sequel that blatantly takes a lot of things from the last game and improves on them, but then you say it's a completely original experience, totally original game, totally original, completely 100% original. It's totally unique. It's its own thing. It's just not.
And where was I going with this?
I don't know. Bro, I just don't know. I don't know.
What that means is that it's...
Dude, that pause was it. That pause killed me. I'm done. Look at this fucking face. This dude lost his train of thought and then just left this dimension while waiting to board the next train. I'm done. I don't know. This video is too long. This video is probably too long. I've been recording for 35 minutes. I don't know how long the video is going to get cut down to, but it's going to be long, just like the poop I'm about to make. The poop it's going to be a big nugget. Big nugget. Fuck. This is what my brain does. This is what happens whenever I respond to you. And it's your fault. It's all your fault. Toodles.